So in this video, I'll be taking you through the latest developments concerning the retrial of the nurse Lucy Letby. Lucy Letby is currently standing trial on one count of attempted murder. The information provided in this video is from the live reporting taken directly from inside the courtroom. Nicholas Johnson KC, prosecuting, continues the cross-examination he began yesterday. Mr. Johnson refers to Letby's police interviews and the nursing record made for child K. The first notes are by Joanne Williams, with Letby adding an admission note between 6:04 and 6:10 a.m. Letby says in police interview she was not given all the notes, such as this one. Mr. Johnson says she was given all the nursing notes for that interview. Letby replies, "I don't know, I would have to check." Mr. Johnson refers to the nursing note made by Joanne Williams, documenting the baby girl's arrival on the unit and the desaturation to 80's event, ETT dislodged. Mr. Johnson says not a blocked ETT, a dislodged one. Letby says it was queried. Joanne Williams notes 2 further episodes of apnea and desaturation with loss of colour. Letby agrees those would be the 2 further events. There is an additional family communication note made by Joanne Williams. Letby booked child K into the unit between 6:04 and 6:10 a.m. The record of it lasts several pages. At the end of it is Melanie Taylor's note, written for care from 07:30 as commencing shift. ETT slipped, loss of colour, heart rate and saturations dropped. Dr. J. Ram re-secured ETT. Mr. Johnson says that Letby had access to all these notes. Letby replies, "I can't say for definite what I had at my interview." Letby yesterday said in police interview she had been relying on her recollection of events for child K on Melanie Taylor's notes. She says, quote, "I had many interviews and I can't say what documents I had for each baby. I have no memory of what notes I was given." Mr. Johnson says you knew very well what you were being asked. Letby replies, "I can't say that I had the notes for definite." A section of Letby's 2019 police interview is played to the court. Mr. Johnson says Letby was agreeing she was there at 3:50 a.m. Letby replies, "No, I was looking at possible options and assuming that Mr. J-Ram had been right." "What do you mean by that?" Letby replies, "I do not remember that event. I was relying on what Mr. J-Ram was saying and trying to fill in the gaps." Mr. Johnson says 10 weeks before the first interview, Letby had searched for child K's surname. Nicholas Johnson says, "A child you had remembered very well." Letby replies, "I disagree." Letby says she stands by the practice of waiting to see if a baby would self-correct when a desaturation began. Mr. Johnson raises the agreed evidence of Elizabeth Morgan, who says it would not be good practice as the lungs were so immature and the risks of unplanned extubation. Nicholas Johnson says, "Do you agree?" Letby replies, "No, because I know what the standard practice was in Chester. I know what our policy was." "For 25-week gestation babies?" Letby replies, "For any baby. From my experience at Liverpool Women's is that you would not put your hands in the incubator, you would wait to self-correct." "For a 25-week gestation baby? You are lying, aren't you?" Letby replies, "No." "And you are lying because you know you were caught by Dr. J-Ram." Letby replies, "No." Letby is asked to say where in her defence statement she disagrees with Dr. J-Ram's account. Letby says there is not in so many words, but adds, "I know I did nothing to interfere with child K." Letby agrees she accepts child K was sedated after 4 a.m. with morphine. She says, quote, "She would have been relaxed, but she could have moved if she wanted to." Asked if she saw child K move, Letby says she did not. Letby says nurses would not write about how a baby was behaving in the incubator. Mr. Johnson says if a baby was active when not being handled and apparently self-extubating, then it would be highly relevant. Letby agrees. Mr. Johnson says there is no record of child K being active in the nursing notes before or after 4 a.m. Mr. Johnson says there was no handling of child K before 4 a.m. other than Letby moving a tube. Letby replies, "No." Mr. Johnson refers to 2 babies in room 2 that Letby was the designated nurse for. Letby agrees she was in that room around 6 a.m. Letby is asked if she went from nursery 2 to nursery 1 to input child K's admission records on the computer. Letby says the records for it will be kept at child K's cot side. Letby is asked if she recalls child K having an X-ray. She replies, "No, I don't recall." Nicholas Johnson says, "Which is it, no or I don't recall?" Letby replies, "I can't recall anything from that night." A record is shown of Anne Kember coming into the neonatal unit at 6:09 a.m. with the portable X-ray machine. Letby agrees the ET tube was in the correct position at the time of the X-ray. Mr. Johnson says by 6:24 a.m. child K had desaturated again. Letby replies, "Yes." Nicholas Johnson says, "Between those times, you would have taken the admission records to her cot side." Letby replies, "Yes, that would be best practice." Mr. Johnson asks Letby if she accepts other staff members' accounts of her being present at the 3rd desaturation. Letby replies, "I have no recollection." Mr. Johnson asks her if they are telling the truth. Letby replies, "That sounds like actions that I would be taking in that event." Nicholas Johnson says, "So you do accept?" Letby replies, "I don't think I can comment on whether someone is telling the truth or not. I only know what I know." A feed chart is shown for a baby in nursery 2, which Letby was the designated nurse for at 6:30 a.m. Letby says she cannot be specific on how long it took, 10 to 15 minutes. A medication prescription is made for a baby in room 1, administered at 6:37 a.m. with Letby as the co-signer. Letby says the feed time of 6:30 a.m. is an approximate time. He asks how the bottle feed could be warmed and fed within 10 minutes. Letby says there are ways to ensure the milk is prepared and warmed in advance of the scheduled feed. Nicholas Johnson says, "Were you keeping accurate records?" Letby replies, "Yes." Mr. Johnson asks if that baby could easily be fed within 10 minutes. Letby replies, "I don't have recollection of that baby." Letby says those times are approximations. Mr. Johnson says the feed was started after 6:25 a.m. as the infusion for child K was administered at that time. Letby says she may have started the feed, then gone out of the nursery and come back. Mr. Johnson asks about the 3rd desaturation and how Letby came to be in nursery 1 at the time. Letby says she cannot recall. She adds the morning handover to the day shift had not happened yet. Letby denies taking the opportunity to interfere with child K. "I don't recall this event," she said. Mr. Johnson says it wasn't an alarm, but it was Letby calling for help that alerted a nursing colleague to the 3rd desaturation. "I don't know how I can accept. I don't have a direct memory," she said. Mr. Johnson says child K's ET tube had slipped in, relatively speaking, a long way while she was well sedated. "That was because you pushed it in, didn't you?" Letby replies, "No." Mr. Johnson says Letby did not want a written record of her being present in the 3rd extubation. Letby says she disagrees. "You tried to kill child K, didn't you?" Letby replies, "No." Letby again denies she killed and attempted to kill other babies. That concludes the cross-examination. Mr. Myers rises to clarify a couple of points. He refers to Letby's defence statement. He says the defence statement referred to 22 allegations, of which child K was one of them. Letby is asked to say how many paragraphs there are in the defence statement. Mr. Myers has a full copy and says there are 213 paragraphs. He adds there are 30 paragraphs on general issues. Letby is asked to read out a couple of paragraphs about that. It includes that there is more information to receive and the defence case continues to be prepared. Mr. Myers asks Letby to read out another part of her statement. Letby reads out her defence statement in which she said she had no recollection of being in room 1 when Dr. J-Ram walked in. Mr. Myers asks in a 213-paragraph statement if Letby gave accounts of where she was on other instances, including on cases where she was convicted. Letby agrees. Mr. Myers refers to Letby's 2018 police interview, in which Letby said she did not recall why she was there in room 1. Benjamin Myers says, "Is that you accepting you were there?" Letby replies, "No." The morphine prescription is presented in that police interview, and Letby was asked if that helped her remember. Letby replied, "Not really, no." Mr. Myers asked if that was Letby accepting she was there. Letby replies, "No." Trial judge Mr. Justice James Goss says that completes the evidence in the case, and it is up to the jury to deliberate. He says there are to be discussions with counsel on matters of law for him to provide legal directions. He says he will provide a summing up of the case which will focus on what he believes to be the salient points. It is not for him to say which parts are relevant and which are not. He says the closing speeches will take place next Monday, and the jury will go out possibly Monday but likely Tuesday to consider their verdict. He reminds jurors of their responsibilities and to return at 10:30 a.m. on Monday.